Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you are not a knight, not a lord, not a poet, or a priest, or even a proper name in the records. You are a medieval serf, and not the exceptional kind. Just another bent back in the mud, born into servitude with no chance of climbing out. You wake in a smoke-choked hut, tied not by chains, but by duty, debt, and a silence so old it's become sacred. You do not fight for glory, you dig for barley. You don't leave a legacy, you leave compost. And no one, not even God, seems particularly interested in your comfort. Before you let the darkness settle in, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I find it strangely fascinating to see who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access to more of these slow spirals through forgotten misery, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You wake up coughing again. That's normal. Everyone coughs. The hut is filled with smoke, because there's a fire but no chimney. Fires are good. Fires mean you're not frozen solid. Fires also mean your lungs feel like old rags dipped in soot, but you take what you can get. You blink a few times in the dark, eyes watering from the ash sting, and try to move without dislodging too many fleas. The straw mattress beneath you is damp and matted, pressed flat by bodies, yours, your brother's, your sister's, and whatever livestock was brought inside last night to keep from freezing. A chicken clucks somewhere behind your neck. It has decided you're warm, you are not, but again, that's not really up to you. Your legs are wrapped around someone else's. Might be your cousin, might be your aunt. Everyone smells roughly the same at this point, like unwashed skin, mildew, sheep fat, and cabbage. Your nose is clogged from smoke and rot and winter, but there's still a thin layer of scent that seeps through. Sour feet, mouldy thatch, and a hint of manure from the pig asleep under the bench. He snores louder than your father. That's saying something. Your father's asleep still, a few feet away, curled like a dying dog under his cloak. He hasn't stirred, but his backside has spoken twice already. A long wet note, like a trumpet made of regret. You've stopped laughing at it. It's not funny anymore. Nothing is, really. You stretch slightly, not too much, because movement dislodges warmth, and warmth is the only thing keeping your joints from locking up entirely. There's a hole in the roof that drips cold water into your sleeve. The thatch is rotting again. You meant to patch it last month, but then it rained, and then it froze, and then your cousin took the ladder to fix the barn and fell off and broke his leg. So you had to butcher the goat early to pay the steward, and now the ladder's broken too. You stare at the beam above you, slick with mildew and mouse droppings, and wonder if the rats will get to your stored barley before the miller does. They usually do. They're faster at least. The hut is one room, one fire, one bench, one table with 3 legs and a constant lean, no walls between you and anyone else, not even the cow in the corner. She stares at you sometimes in the dark, with those wide, glassy eyes chewing endlessly. You think she might know something you don't. Maybe she's just judging you. You don't blame her. There's a pot near the hearth filled with something that was probably food 2 days ago. It's grey now, with a skin forming on top like a damp blister. You'll reheat it tonight and call it stew. You always do. Outside, the wind hisses through the gaps in the door, which doesn't quite close anymore, since your uncle leaned on it and tore out the hinge. It's fastened with twine now, not rope, not a latch, just twine and hope. The cold seeps in low and slow, sliding across the floor like a curse, licking at your bare toes. You pull the rough blanket tighter around you, though it does nothing really. It's more whole than cloth. Still, you hold it like it might love you if you don't let go. There's no dawn yet, just a kind of grey thickening in the thatch light above. Morning in winter doesn't arrive quickly. It creeps in reluctantly, like everything else. You can already hear someone outside, the steward's boy probably, shouting something half sensible. The voice is hoarse and the words are slurred with frost, but you know the message. It's time to work. Again, still, forever. You press your eyes shut for a moment longer and pretend you didn't hear. But you did. Everyone did. No one moves. Then your mother groans softly, like a dying tree, and sits up. Her hair is plastered to her cheek with sweat and smoke, and she's already muttering about the firewood. There's never enough. She'll send your sister out to scrape up twigs again, and then complain the stew tastes of bark. You sit up slowly, back screaming from another night, on damp straw and frozen limbs. You can't stand up straight anymore. Not that you ever really did. You're built for bending, for lifting, for enduring. That's your station after all. You scratch at your scalp, feel something skitter under your fingernail, and stop. Better not to know. Your shirt smells like wet dogs and old onions. You wore it yesterday, and the day before, and all the days before that. It's your only shirt. The trousers, if you can call them that, are more patched than fabric, held together with coarse thread and divine apathy. You stand up swaying slightly and bang your shin against the edge of the stool. You don't swear. You're not allowed to. The priest says it opens the door to demons. You mutter instead, not a prayer, but something halfway between a groan and a death rattle. You step over your brother, who hasn't moved since last night, and nudge the embers in the hearth. Still warm, barely. You add a stick, then two, then blow until your head spins, and the coals glow orange again. A small flame licks upward. You can almost feel it. Almost. Your sister wakes up and starts crying. No reason, just cold and tired and young. Your mother snaps at her to hush, then starts coughing. Deep, rattling coughs that sound like something dying in her chest. She'll say it's nothing. She always does. It probably is nothing. Just years of smoke, dust, ash, and the occasional lungful of thatch mould. Your father shifts, then rolls over, and says the same thing he says every morning. Get to the fields then. You nod, though he wasn't talking to you in particular. Just whoever's listening. Just the universe, maybe. You gulp down some of the grey water from the jug in the corner. It tastes like clay and hay, and a little bit of iron. You hope it's iron. You hope it's not rat. You splash some on your face, instantly regret it. Then drag your cloak around your shoulders. It's too small. It's always been too small. It used to belong to your grandfather. Or someone's grandfather. The patchwork is so old it's gone soft in places, like skin. You don't think it's warm anymore, but it gives the illusion of being wrapped in something. You cling to that. There's a chunk of stale rye bread on the table, hard enough to bruise a tooth, soft enough to chew if you soak it in your spit for long enough. You do. It's not good, but it's food, and it stays down. The chicken at your feet pecks at your toes, just in case you're hiding grain between them. You're not. Not today. The pig wakes up with a snort, and immediately begins rooting through the old straw. He finds something. You hope it's not edible. No one says goodbye. No one hugs. There are no kisses on the forehead. No whispered prayers for safety. Just movement. Slow, resigned, habitual movements. Your brother pulls on his boots. Your sister wipes her nose with her sleeve. Your father finally rises, scratching his stomach like it owes him money. Your mother spoons some of the stew paste into a wooden bowl, then changes her mind and pours it back. She mutters something about hunger, then tells you not to be late coming home. You won't be. You never are. You open the door. Or rather, you push it until it gives way, creaking like an old bone, and step into the pale grey dawn. Your feet sink immediately into cold, sucking mud. The yard is more swamp than ground this time of year. A puddle swallows half your boot. Somewhere in the distance a crow shrieks, as if even it is offended by what it sees. You pull your cloak tighter, squint toward the horizon, where the fields wait, and take your first step into the day. The wind slaps your face with wet fingers, and your stomach growls at the sky. The steward will be waiting. He always is. You'll be bent double by sunrise. That's just how mornings go. That's just how life goes. You don't ask why anymore. You already know. You trudge toward the fields with fingers stiff as twigs, boots soaked through before you've left the yard. The sun is barely above the trees, a watery smear in a sky the colour of unwashed wool. It offers no warmth, only the vague promise of visibility. Your cloak flaps behind you like a damp rag, and your breath ghosts ahead, as though even it is trying to escape. Your shoulder aches where the yoke rubs raw, and your legs already burn from the cold, but you keep walking. There's no choice in the matter. There never is. The steward watches from the rise above the fields, perched on his little horse like a lump of judgment wrapped in fur. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence alone is command enough. His eyes sweep over you and the others with the same expression he uses for livestock. Because that's what you are, really. Movable property. Less valuable than a plough, more costly than a pig, and infinitely replaceable. The Lord has dozens of you, hundreds maybe. You've never counted. What would be the point? The fields stretch out before you, lumpy and half frozen, crusted with the leftovers of a miserable harvest. This land isn't yours. It never was. It never will be. It belongs to the Lord, the manor lord, the landholder, the belly and silk, who lives up at the stone house beyond the forest line. You've seen him twice, once at Easter, when he arrived with trumpets and banners, and rode past like a god on horseback, and once when he came to watch a hanging. He didn't speak to anyone that time either, just nodded when the man dropped. Your family has lived on this land for generations. You can name your father, your grandfather, and his father before him, all born on this soil, all buried under it, all yoked to it like cattle. That doesn't make you owners. That makes you fixtures. The trees may have more freedom than you do. The birds certainly. You can't leave without permission. You can't marry without permission. You can't sell a sheep or plant a bean without someone else's say-so. The land owns you because the Lord owns the land. And the system, the customs, they call them, make sure you never forget it. Every year, you owe rent. Not coin. You don't see much of that. But in grain, eggs, chickens, maybe a goat if you're unlucky. You give what you grow, what you raise, what you scrape together from the dirt, and in return, the Lord lets you stay on your own land. He takes the barley and leaves you with the chaff. The steward records it all with a stick and a smirk, marking tally notches on a board that you'll never see. You're not allowed to read, and you're certainly not allowed to question the numbers. If you come up short, they don't take less. They take what's left. Then there's the corvée labour. That's the cheerful bit where you get to work the Lord's land instead of your own, using your tools, your ox, your time, and your energy to make sure his barns are full. You spend days hoeing fields that feed other mouths, building fences around land you'll never walk freely on, repairing roads that lead to places you can't go. The steward reminds you that it's your duty, part of your bond. You try not to remind him that duty doesn't feed your children. That would be insolent. You owe labour in spring for planting, in summer for haying, in autumn for harvesting, and in winter for whatever whim the manor dreams up. Wood cutting, ditch digging, stone hauling. There's no season without obligation. Holy days don't count. If anything, they add extra tasks, decorations to hang, processions to sweep for, beasts to slaughter and carry and clean. When the Lord hosts a feast, you work harder than ever. When the lady wants herbs for her bath, someone trudges 10 miles to fetch them. Not her, of course, not even her servants. A serf. Sometimes the steward comes down with new orders from the manor court. The field boundaries have shifted. The grain quota's been raised. The hens didn't lay enough this year, so you owe twice as many next. A boy stole turnips from the Lord's garden. Now everyone's tithes go up until the loss is covered. There's no appeal. The court is the Lord's men, and the law is whatever they said last week. You could swear they make up the rules mid-sentence just to watch you squirm. And you do squirm, because you can't afford not to. Even the tools you use to scratch at the land are technically the Lord's. or at least regulated by his approval. The village blacksmith needs his permission to fix your ploughshare, and he'll charge you a tithe for the privilege. If you break a wheel or lose a spade, it's your fault, even if it was your neighbour's ox that trampled it. The community shares everything but blame. That part's always individual. Worse than the rents, worse than the corvée, worse than the arbitrary punishments and shifting dues, is the simple fact that your body is not yours. If the Lord demands your son for a task, you give him. If he wants your daughter in the kitchens, you send her. If you die, your heir can only inherit your house, which again isn't really yours, by paying a death duty. If you want to marry off your child to someone in the next village, you pay a fee. It's called a merchet, a heritage fine, a privilege of consent. If you don't pay it, the marriage isn't valid. And if you run off to wed without permission, you're both punished. You've seen that punishment. It involved stocks and shame and a cow bladder filled with dung. Sometimes people whisper about running, about freedom, about towns where you can work for wages, own a shop, even rise in station. But that's a fantasy. If you flee and get caught, you'll be whipped, branded, or worse. And if you don't get caught, you'll probably starve. Towns don't take kindly to vagabonds. Freedom is a word you hear in sermons, and never in sentences that end well. The steward rides past again, his pony's hooves splashing mud on your hem. He doesn't apologise, he never does. He just tells you that the upper barley plot needs ploughing before sundown. You nod, because saying no is treason, and treason doesn't end with a conversation. You pass the message on to your brother, who spits into his palm and tightens the yoke straps. The ox lumbers forward, groaning like the rest of you. The others are already at work. Old Alan with his twisted back, hoeing furrows with hands that barely close. Marjorie hauling stones out of the path with one arm, the other lost to some accident no one talks about. Even the children are in the fields, scaring birds from the seed rows with rattles and shouts. You're all part of the same machine, a broken one, but still turning, still grinding. You reach the edge of your assigned strip, a patch of land so narrow it feels like an insult. The soil is clumped and sour, half frozen in places and riddled with roots. You prod it with the iron tip of your plough and sigh. You'll need 3 passes just to loosen it enough to seed. The ox stares at you with glazed contempt. You whisper something to it. Not a prayer. Those don't work here, just a plea, a noise, a sound that means, let's get through this. You bend your back and begin the first row. The blade catches on something, a stone or maybe a bone, and jars your shoulder hard enough to make your teeth clack. You keep going. You always do. The mud sucks at your feet with every step, and the cold cuts through your tunic like wet cloth. A crow cackles in the hedge. The steward is already shouting again. This is not your land. These are not your crops. That's not your grain, not your profit, not your choice. You will break your body to fill another man's granary, and when the barn is full, you'll still go hungry. That's the order of things. That's the way of the world. And you belong to it. The ox is technically not dying, but it moves like it's halfway there, and that's enough to worry you. The beast wheezes with every step, its ribs visible under the mottled hide, and one of its hooves drags slightly in the mud like a forgotten promise. You mutter encouragements under your breath, not because you think the ox understands, but because talking to yourself is better than listening to the steward shout again. You're already behind. You're always behind. The seasons move faster than your tools. The plough is an heirloom, which is to say it's a warped block of timber, held together by rust and string. It cuts shallow, barely turning the earth, and the blade is more suggestion than edge. You've sharpened it with a rock and a prayer, and now it judders with every snag, catching on roots, stones, and sometimes nothing at all. Every few yards it lurches sideways, and needs to be righted by hand. Your hands are not what they used to be. Not that they were ever particularly useful, just thicker now, knotted with calluses, the skin permanently stained by mud and blood, and the yellowish scabs of old blisters. The soil itself is an enemy, It's either too wet, too dry, or too cursed depending on the week. Right now, it's damp and lumpy, resisting the plough in heavy clods that suck at your feet and hide rotten roots like traps. Later in the summer, it will dry into something like pottery, cracking at the seams and killing everything delicate enough to need moisture. No season is kind. The saints don't help. The priest says hardship brings salvation. You suspect it mostly brings back pain and dead children. Behind you, the ox coughs, a wet, meaty sound. You don't have a second one. You can't afford to lose the first. If it collapses, you'll be forced to pull the plough yourself. It's happened before, to your cousin 2 villages over. He dislocated a shoulder and snapped a rib trying to do what 2 beasts were bred for. He's still limping. You think about him every time the ox hesitates, every time it groans like an old gate. You should feed it more, but the grain stores are low, and the pigs eat before the ox does. The pigs, at least, end up in someone's pot. This ox will die of exhaustion, not purpose. The sun rises reluctantly, a pale smear over the hedgerow. You squint against the light, but it offers no warmth. Your breath still fogs the air. The mud remains stiff and stubborn. You keep ploughing, row after crooked row, adjusting your grip every few minutes to avoid blisters. It doesn't work. Your fingers burn anyway, then go numb. You miss the feeling and then, strangely, miss the pain. Numbness is worse. It means you're losing parts of yourself. You watch the blood return in slow purple pulses and keep going. There's no rhythm to this work, no grace, no poetry, nothing like the songs the priest recites about man and land and harmony. There's only trudging, wrenching, muttering, and the occasional startled yelp when a rat bolts from a furrow. You've seen men scream like children when something bites their ankle. You've also seen what happens to them later. Festering wounds, blackened toes, fevers that rise fast and end in silence. Dirt gets into everything. Infection is only ever one splinter away. You pause to stretch your back and drink from a cracked leather flask that smells faintly of mould. The water tastes of pond and cow and you drink it anyway. Your stomach growls so loudly you look around to make sure no one heard it. You had half a crust this morning and it's already gone to memory. You'll eat again after sunset, if the stew hasn't spoiled, and if no one else claims the bigger ladle. Until then, it's the gnawing ache and the memory of flavour. You've chewed on twigs before, just to trick your mouth into thinking it's occupied. Some days it helps. The seed pouch is nearly empty. You scatter what you have, with the best aim you can manage, watching the wind undo your work grain by grain. The crows are already circling. You hate crows. They know more than they should, those beady little demons. You've thrown stones at them, sticks, even your own hat once, but they always come back. They sit on the fence posts and wait, patient and greedy. You imagine they report to the steward, or the devil, or both. As you pass into the next row, you spot your neighbour 3 fields over, a thin man named Everard, with a permanent squint, and a cough that sounds like dying leaves. He's hoeing turnips that didn't sprout, muttering to himself, and occasionally swatting at invisible pests. You used to think he was mad. Now you understand. Madness is just what happens when your body breaks before your spirit does. You nod to him. He doesn't nod back. You're not sure he sees you. Maybe that's for the best. By midday, your arms are trembling. Your legs are lead. The ox has stopped 3 times to void its bowels in a slow, steaming heap that smells worse than the pig shed. You've said nothing because saying something wouldn't help, and complaining gets you labelled difficult, which is 1 step away from lazy, which is 1 step away from dead in the ditch. You swallow another mouthful of pond water and rub your face with your sleeve. It leaves a smear of mud from cheek to chin, but you don't bother to clean it off. You'll be filthy again in minutes. The clouds gather thickly in the afternoon sky. It's going to rain again. The furrows you just finished will be soaked through, the seed washed away, or drowned in its own grave. You think briefly about covering them, then laugh under your breath. Cover them with what? Hopes, prayers, your own body? You've tried all three. None of them work particularly well. By late afternoon, you've moved on to the barley field. The Lord's barley, of course, not yours. And your hands are bleeding where the yoke strap rubbed raw. You wrap a rag around one palm and keep going. The steward rides past and scowls. He says you're slow. He says you should have been done an hour ago. You nod, apologise, and keep going. He's already turning back toward the manor. He'll dine on meat tonight. You'll chew gristle and think about what he must smell like. The rain starts just as you reach the end of the final row. Cold, needling drops that sting your skin and turn the earth into sludge beneath your boots. You curse the sky, quietly, behind your teeth, and then immediately apologise to no one in particular. You can't afford divine attention. The last time you blasphemed out loud, your sister got sick the next day. You're not sure it's connected, but you're not willing to test it again. The ox stumbles near the fence post, nearly topples, then steadies itself with a wheeze that sounds like a prayer in reverse. You pat its side. It flinches. You wonder if it dreams of better lives. You wonder if it hates you. You wouldn't blame it if it did. The sun begins its slow descent, vanishing behind a wall of grey cloud, and the temperature drops just enough to make your teeth chatter. Your arms are weak, your legs ache, and your shoulders throb like bruised fruit. You lower the plough, lead the ox to the shed, and try not to look at the fields as you pass, but you do. And what you see is nothing to be proud of. Rows of half-planted, half-flooded, bird-pecked misery. You'll tell the steward it was the rain. He'll say it was your fault anyway. Back at the hut, you'll count the sacks of barley and know how much the Lord will take. You'll do the math, badly but sincerely, and realise there won't be enough for winter. There never is. You'll talk about rationing. You'll talk about stretching. You'll pretend to believe it will be different this year. As the light fades and the last of the crows take flight, you stand in the middle of someone else's land, covered in someone else's mud, aching from the effort of someone else's harvest. You breathe through your mouth because your nose is full of soil, smoke, and resentment. You stare at the pitiful strips of churned up earth and think about what it might take to survive the winter. Not thrive, not grow, just survive. And even that feels like asking too much. The week drags by in a haze of mud hunger and repetition. The days blur together, ploughing, hauling, aching, sleeping, until you forget what part of you hurts most. By the time the steward's voice falls silent and the plough is stabled for a day, it's not relief you feel. It's Sunday, and that means a different kind of punishment. You're not allowed to work, but you're not allowed to rest either. The fields remain untouched, but your feet still ache from the walk to church. Your back still smarts from the week's labour, and your stomach still grumbles the same way it did yesterday. Sunday is not a day of ease. It's a day of forced piety, of stiff clothes and colder air, of standing for hours in a building that smells like wax, mildew, and the slow rot of forgotten bones. You never look forward to it. You only dread it slightly less than confession. The bell rings out across the village, hollow and metallic, calling you like cattle. You've already washed your face in a bucket of gritty water and pulled your least ragged tunic over your shoulders. It smells like smoke and mouse droppings, but it has fewer holes than the others, so it's what you wear. Your mother has combed your sister's hair into something roughly resembling order, and your brother is muttering that he doesn't see the point. You agree with him silently, but say nothing. No one skips church, not unless they're ready to pay a fine, or worse, be labelled godless. You can't afford either. The church itself sits at the village's highest point, a squat stone structure with a leaning steeple and moss growing in every crack. Inside it's cold even in summer and freezing in winter. The floor is packed dirt, swept weekly but never clean, and the wooden benches are splintery and unforgiving. You're not important enough to sit anyway. You stand, like most others, crammed in with your neighbours in damp wool and shared body heat, praying silently not to faint before the service ends. The smell of unwashed humanity is overwhelming. It rises in waves, old sweat, spoiled milk, fermented breath, but no one seems to notice anymore. The priest appears near the altar, wrapped in layers of linen and silk, his hands soft and ringed with fat. You don't know where he came from exactly. Somewhere south, you think, or maybe west, but he speaks Latin fluently, and with the kind of emphasis that makes your ears ring. You understand none of it, of course. Latin is for God, and those who claim to speak for him. You only recognise the cadence now, the rise and fall of words like infernus peccatum damnatio. There's always a sermon, always a warning, always a story about someone who sinned and then suffered for it, in agonising detail. Fire, worms, darkness, teeth. That's the part you understand. You try to follow along. You really do. You bow when the others bow, kneel when they kneel, cross yourself in the same direction as the people beside you. You mumble the prayers you've memorised phonetically, the syllables worn smooth with repetition, but still alien on your tongue. The priest says God is merciful, but only if you're obedient, repentant, generous with your tithes, and never forget your station. Salvation, he says, requires humility and payment, especially payment. Coins if you have them, chickens if you don't. You don't know what sin you're most guilty of, but you know you're guilty. The priest reminds you often that everyone is born wicked. You believe him, not because it makes sense, but because it's repeated often and with enough volume to become truth. He says pride is a sin, so you stop thinking of yourself as worth anything. He says lust is a sin, so you feel shame when you look at your own wife. He says sloth is a sin, so you hate yourself for the one moment each evening when you sit down before collapsing into sleep. The only time you feel vaguely innocent is when you're bent over in the fields, and even then, you suspect you're being watched. There's a painted mural behind the altar. You've stared at it since you were a child. It shows sinners in torment, naked bodies tumbling into red mouths, arms flailing, flames licking their skin. One man clutches his face in agony, while a demon prods him with a trident. Another is chained to a wheel, his flesh peeled in ribbons. You used to think it was a story. Now you think it's a threat. Every Sunday, you look at it and wonder if one of those figures is meant to resemble someone in the congregation. Maybe it already does. The Mass drags on for hours. The priest reads from a book no one else is allowed to touch. You've never seen a Bible up close. You don't know what's inside it, only that it's sacred and forbidden. The priest says it holds the word of God. You've never heard God speak, only the priest. And the priest has a collection box near the exit, a ledger of who's paid and who hasn't, and a very long memory. You once saw him slap a boy for spitting near the chapel door. That boy had a limp for months. The priest never apologised. He just said the devil walks in dirty shoes. After the sermon comes confession. You line up with the others, waiting your turn to kneel, and whisper your failings into a wooden grate. You don't remember half of what you've done, so you make things up. You say you lied. You say you thought about stealing a turnip. You say you were envious of your neighbour's wife, even though she's toothless and smells like boiled weeds. You say whatever comes to mind. The priest mutters a penance, a prayer, a fast, sometimes both, and you nod obediently. You don't feel forgiven, you feel tired. There's a psalm near the end, sung by a choir of boys too cold to hit the right notes and too hungry to stay upright. One of them faints during the final verse and is dragged away by his brother, who hisses not to embarrass them. You watch with mild interest. No one stops singing. No one asks if he's all right. The priest doesn't pause. The Mass continues, as it always does, with or without your full presence. Finally, the benediction. The priest blesses you with a flourish, flings water at your face from a golden spoon, and announces that you are dismissed. No one claps, no one smiles, everyone simply begins shuffling toward the door, like prisoners at the end of sentencing. You step out into the cold with stiff legs and colder thoughts. Your feet squish into the mud. Your hands search for warmth in your sleeves, and your eyes wander back to that mural again, the one with the sinners screaming. You're sure one of them looked at you this time. Outside, you're expected to behave piously for the rest of the day. That means no labour, no cursing, no arguing with your family, and no pretending to enjoy yourself. You're supposed to reflect. On what exactly, no one tells you. You walk home beside your brother, who hasn't spoken since sunrise, and past the baker's boy, throwing stones at a stray dog. He's smiling. You wonder what he confessed. The village is quiet on Sundays, not from peace but from fear. You can feel it in the way doors are shut quickly, the way voices stay low, the way even laughter is stifled before it has time to grow. Religion is not joy here. It's not comfort. It's a system of control wrapped in incense and Latin. You don't feel closer to God when you leave church. You feel smaller, less certain, more alone. As you approach the bend in the road, you pass a painted board nailed to a tree, an image of judgment, freshly done by a travelling friar. A man in chains stands before a robed figure, flames behind him, angels above, pointing and frowning. The message is clear: behave or burn. You pause in front of it and stare for a moment. You're not sure what you've done wrong, but you're certain you've done something. You reach the hut as the sun dips low, casting the trees in pale gold and long shadow. Your feet are frozen. Your lips are cracked. Your soul, if you have one, feels worn thin. You spent your only day off learning that you're damned by default and broke by divine design. And tomorrow, you'll return to the fields, with sin still in your bones and no answers in your ears. You step inside, the door creaking closed behind you, and try to remember whether the priest said salvation was possible, or if he just warned you what happens when it isn't. By Tuesday, a neighbour has been accused of stealing eggs. That's how the morning begins. With a whisper passed from one hut to another, a murmur that sharpens as it travels, growing louder until it reaches your ears as a name, then a charge, then a summons. The steward's voice cracks through the village like a whip, calling everyone to gather by the old elm in front of the manor. You go, not because you're curious, but because not going is noticed, and being noticed in this place is dangerous. The neighbour in question is a thin man named Tobin, who smells like damp wool and speaks too quickly when he's nervous, which is often. His wife is quiet. His children look like they've never had a full meal. The chickens in question belong to the manor, or more precisely, to the steward, who oversees the livestock kept on the common. One hen went missing 2 nights ago. Someone said they saw Tobin's boy near the pens. That's all it takes. The villagers gather slowly, bundled against the cold, their eyes low and their mouths tighter than usual. No one wants to speak first. No one wants to stand too close to Tobin either. He kneels now at the base of the elm tree, hands bound with rough twine, his head bowed like a penitent or a condemned man. The steward sits on a raised wooden chair, looking half bored and half hungry, as though he's deciding whether to eat the man or dismiss him. The manor's bailiff stands nearby, arms crossed, wearing a cloak too fine for a man that size. He always looks too warm. He never shares. This is justice manor style. The Lord doesn't attend, he rarely does. The steward handles these matters: egg theft, fence disputes, accusations of adultery or witchery, or failing to pay the annual chicken. You've seen him fine a man for keeping pigs too close to the road. You've seen him pardon a woman who clearly poisoned her 3rd husband because her family tithes well, and the priest said she was pious. The law isn't a set of rules here. It's a performance, a ritual, a coin toss with extra steps. Tobin pleads his case in short, broken sentences. Says he didn't steal anything. Says his boy was just passing by. Says they haven't eaten eggs in months. His voice cracks when he says that last part, and you believe him. Not that it matters. The steward narrows his eyes, asks no questions, and gestures to the bailiff, who produces a small iron pot from a wooden crate. You groan inwardly. not the boiling ordeal. Again. They build the fire quickly, stuffing it with dry straw and old branches. The iron pot is filled with water, placed carefully over the flames, and left to seethe. The heat makes the water tremble, then boil, then froth and hiss like something alive. When it's ready, the steward calls for Tobin to present his hand. You've seen this before, the ordeal of scolding. The accused reaches into the pot to retrieve a small stone from the bottom. Then he's bandaged. 3 days later, they unwrap the wound. If it's healing, he's innocent. If it's festering, he's guilty. It's not about truth. It's about how well your skin holds up to divine judgment. Tobin hesitates. The steward raises an eyebrow. The bailiff shifts his weight, and the gathered villagers lean forward in collective dread. Tobin plunges his hand into the boiling water, lets out a choked scream, and pulls it free, red, blistered, steaming. You see the skin peel at the edges of his palm. The priest steps forward, wraps it in linen, and mutters a prayer that's supposed to help. You doubt it will. Sometimes trials don't involve water. Sometimes it's fire. Sometimes it's oath-taking, swearing innocence with your hand on a relic, hoping no one calls you a liar. If 3 people of good standing say you're guilty, you're guilty. Doesn't matter what you say. The steward doesn't like his time wasted. If you annoy him, he can order a beating on the spot, or a fine, or both. You've seen him confiscate a man's ox for speaking out of turn. The man cried like a child, and then walked behind his plough for the rest of the season. The ox went to the manor stables. Fines are the most common punishment. Easy, profitable, and humiliating. Can't pay? Then they take your tools, or your food, or your child's dowry. Some people go into permanent debt from one mistake. Others sell what little they have to avoid the lash. You once gave up your winter boots to pay for an accident that wasn't even your fault. Your brother's pig got loose and trampled the Lord's garden. You limped for weeks. No one thanked you. Not all crimes are real. Sometimes the charges are invented because the manor needs revenue or someone has a grudge. The miller once accused a man of cheating his grain toll just because he didn't like the way the man spoke to his daughter. The steward sided with the miller, of course. The man was fined 3 hens and banned from the mill for a month. You shared your barley with him that week, and he wept when you did. You never told anyone. Generosity is suspicious in a place like this. Worst of all are the hangings. They're rare, but they happen. Theft, murder, repeated offences, defiance. If the steward decides someone is beyond saving, or if the Lord wants to make an example, a gibbet is raised and a noose tied. You're expected to attend, to watch, to learn. The priest says it's justice. You're not so sure. The last man who hung stole a sheep to feed his family. The rope creaked for hours. His daughter hasn't spoken since at 3 days pass. The priest unwraps Tobin's hand in front of the entire village. It's infected, swollen and black around the edges. You can smell it from where you stand. The priest declares him guilty with the same tone he uses to bless a marriage. The steward nods and orders a whipping. Not too hard, he says. Just enough to leave a mark. Tobin is tied to a post in front of the manor house, shirt torn away, back bare to the wind. The bailiff delivers the lashes, slow, deliberate, rhythmic. Each crack of the whip echoes like thunder, and with every strike Tobin flinches, gasps, then falls silent. By the 7th he's barely breathing. By the 12th he's unconscious. The priest crosses himself. The steward sighs and calls for water. The villagers remain still, silent, complicit. You say nothing. You look at your feet. You remember your own unpaid due. The 1 chicken short on your tithe, the coin you owe the mill, the complaint you muttered when no one was listening. Or at least, you thought no one was listening. You wonder who will speak your name when your time comes. You wonder if it's already been spoken. One day, you're told you're getting married. You weren't consulted. No one sat you down and asked about feelings or dreams or whether you liked the way she laughed. That's not how this works. Marriage here is not a question. It's an arrangement, struck by your parents, approved by your lord, and recorded by the steward with the same bored frown he uses for livestock tallies. You hear the news at supper? Your mother says it between spoonfuls of watery beans, like she's commenting on the weather. Your father grunts. Your sister keeps chewing. You nod. What else is there to do? You know the girl vaguely. Her name is Annalise. You've seen her hauling water from the well, sleeves rolled up to the elbow, shoulders hunched like someone expecting rain. She doesn't smile often. You don't blame her. Her family lost 2 sons last year to cough and fever, and the third went lame from a bad step on the mill bridge. The marriage is a way to bind 2 struggling houses together, not through affection, but through shared obligation. Her family needs another pair of hands to carry firewood. Yours needs another dowry chicken. Everyone needs something. Before anything happens, you pay the merchant, the heritage fine, a coin or 2, or maybe a goat, depending on the steward's mood. It's not for the wedding, it's for the permission, because serfs don't marry freely. The Lord owns your body, your land, and your bloodline. If you want to mix your dirt with someone else's, you pay for the privilege. If you marry without asking, you risk a fine, or a whipping, or both. The Lord likes to keep track of who belongs to whom, and who owes what for it. The wedding is held on a Thursday between a funeral and a pig slaughter. The priest mumbles a few Latin phrases over your heads while swatting at flies. Annalise wears a dress that belonged to her dead aunt. You wear the same tunic you wore to Tobin's trial. There's no ring, no vows, just a nod, a prayer, and a sheep's bladder of sour ale passed around the guests. Someone brings a fiddle. Someone else vomits behind the chapel. You dance once stiffly, and then return home to sleep in the same bed you've always slept in. Except now, it's warmer and twice as crowded. Sex is not romantic. It's not passionate. It's not even private. It's functional, quick, quiet, awkward. You don't know what she likes, and you're not sure it matters. There's no fire, no conversation, no soft touch under starlight. There's a blanket, a straw mattress, and a need to produce children before one of you dies. That's what marriage means here. Not partnership, not comfort, but production. You don't talk much in the mornings. She stokes the fire while you tie your boots. She fetches water while you feed the pig. You nod at each other before heading out to separate fields, and you nod again when you return. Sometimes she brings you a scrap of bread or a handful of berries she didn't tell her mother about. Once, she sewed a patch onto your cloak without asking. You noticed it days later. You didn't say anything, but you wore it with something close to gratitude. She works harder than you expected, not because she wants to, but because she has to. There's no such thing as rest, not for a peasant wife. She rises before dawn, tends the fire, milks the goat, grinds the grain, carries the water, cooks the food, patches the clothes, weaves the flax, feeds the chickens, and still manages to hoe a full row before you've even cleared your throat. You once made the mistake of offering to help with the washing. She laughed. Not cruelly, just tired. That was the first time she smiled at you. She gets pregnant after the first frost. You're not surprised. That's the goal after all. Children are the only wealth you're allowed to produce. More hands for the field, more mouths to scream at the sky, more bodies to bury before they grow old. You don't celebrate exactly. You just notice that she's moving slower, holding her stomach more often, avoiding the smoke when she can. You don't talk about names. That would be presumptuous. You've seen too many babies die to risk naming one too soon. The pregnancy is hard. There's no doctor, no midwife with real training, just a neighbour woman who's seen a dozen births and buried half of them. Annalise cries at night sometimes, trying not to wake you. You pretend to sleep. You want to help, but you don't know how. You offer her extra stew and lose your portion for the day. She thanks you, then throws it up in the morning. Her ankles swell. Her face loses colour. Her hands shake when she lifts the pot. You say nothing. What could you possibly say? Winter creeps in. The hut grows colder, the air thinner. You plug the cracks in the walls with old cloth and straw. but the wind still whistles through. She stops going to the field. She stops eating full meals. She starts praying more, whispering into the straw mattress before sleep, lips cracked and eyes sunken. You watch her belly grow and wonder what's growing inside. A blessing, a curse, something in between. When the labour comes, it comes hard. She doubles over near the fire pit and screams so loudly the pig bolts from the corner. The neighbour woman arrives, carrying a bundle of rags and a knife. You're told to leave. You do. You sit outside in the cold for hours, hands clenched, knees frozen, the sky bleeding grey above you. You hear every cry, every muffled command, every shuffling footstep. You smell blood through the cracks in the wall. You think of your own mother, though you don't know why. The baby arrives just after midnight. A boy, they say, small, quiet, pale. The neighbour woman hands him to you wrapped in a blanket that used to be your old cloak. He doesn't cry. He blinks once. You don't know what that means. Annalise is asleep, or unconscious. You're not sure which. The neighbour says she'll live. Maybe. You nod and sit beside the fire with the baby on your lap. He smells like iron and milk, and something too new to describe. The priest arrives in the morning to baptise him. He brings holy water, a candle, and the same indifferent tone he uses for funerals. You watch as he makes the sign of the cross over the child's head, mutters the Latin blessing, and declares him part of the flock. You wonder how long he'll stay in it. You don't pick a name. The priest suggests one, and you nod. It's easier that way. You won't use it much anyway. You look at the child's face, red, wrinkled, barely human, and wonder if he'll survive the week. You wonder if Annalise will. You wonder if you will. You don't feel joy. You feel responsibility. You feel hunger. You feel the weight of another mouth, another future, another debt to fate. The fire pops. The wind moans through the thatch. And somewhere outside, the steward is counting eggs. A few weeks pass and the harvest failed. Again. Not all the way, but enough that everyone knows what's coming. The barley was stunted from too much rain. The turnips rotted in the ground. And the peas were eaten alive by bugs the steward insists don't exist. The grain sacks look full if you don't touch them, but they're half husk and half wish. You tried to stretch the yield with dried nettles and old oats, but the rats were faster. By the time the tithes were collected and the miller took his share, what's left wouldn't feed a family of mice, and your family's far hungrier than mice. The winter comes early, scraping the village with wind and locking the wells with ice. You seal the cracks in the hut again, though it's like trying to dam a river with straw. The cold seeps into everything, your bones, your breath, your thoughts. The stew pot stays empty more days than not, and the bread grows thinner each week, padded with bark, moss and powdered acorns that taste like wood rot and bitterness. You chew slowly and swallow hard. You don't ask what it's made of, you just try to make it last. Your wife hasn't spoken much since the baby came. She rises slowly, moves stiffly, and barely touches her food. You try not to notice how her cheekbones have sharpened, or how the colour has drained from her lips. The child is still breathing, for now. He cries weakly at night, and sleeps most of the day, curled beside the hearth wrapped in whatever rags you can spare. His skin is the colour of skimmed milk, and his fingers twitch like a dying bird's. You don't ask if he's hungry. The answer is obvious. The neighbours are thinning. You notice it first by the silence. Houses that once clattered with movement now sit still. No smoke, no shouting, no footsteps in the mud. Old Gervais hasn't come to the well in 4 days. You find his door ajar, and the body curled inside like a piece of kindling. No one comes to collect him. You don't mention it to the steward. You know better. He's not interested in people without dues. If they can't pay, they can't die officially. Then the illness comes. First it's just a cough. Wet, thick, slow to leave. Then the fevers start. Your brother gets it first, waking in the night, drenched in sweat, and muttering nonsense about owls under the floor. His skin turns grey, then purple, then something darker. By the second day, he's vomiting black water and clutching his belly like it's trying to escape. The priest arrives, offers a blessing, and tells your family it's divine punishment for gluttony. You haven't had a full meal in weeks. You want to laugh. Instead, you help your father hold your brother down while he convulses on the floor. He dies on the third night, stiff and leaking, his face twisted in a way that makes it hard to remember what he looked like before. You bury him behind the goat shed because the graveyard is full and the ground near the chapel is frozen solid. The priest says the soul will find its way if the heart was pure. You doubt it, but you nod. You mark the spot with a stone, then change your mind. Stones get stolen. The illness spreads quickly. It moves through the village like smoke. Invisible at first, then everywhere. You hear that a family downriver all died within days. Their hut burned afterward to stop the rot. You believe it. The stench in some corners of the village is so strong you have to breathe through your sleeve just to pass. Children waste away until they look like bundles of twigs. Men collapse in the fields, mid-step. Women stop bleeding, then start again in ways that make no sense. Every cough becomes a warning. Every fever, a countdown. Ergot gets into the rye. You didn't realise at first the bread just tasted odd. But then your neighbour's daughter began twitching during morning chores, her limbs jerking like a puppet's. She screamed about snakes in the thatch and clawed at her eyes until her mother tied her hands together. The priest said she was touched by the devil and locked her in the chapel. 2 days later, she went quiet. They found her curled at the altar, lips blue, tongue missing. They say she bit it off herself. The grave diggers don't ask questions anymore. They come with cloths over their faces and dig shallow pits where they can. No prayers, no markers, no songs. Just earth, body, earth. Sometimes 2 or 3 in one hole. If you're lucky, someone remembers their name. If you're not, you're just that one from the lean-to near the mill. You once tried to help with a burial. Your fingers froze around the shovel. The gravedigger told you to leave it. The dogs would finish what the dirt couldn't. Your wife grows thinner by the week. She still tends the fire and hums to the child, but her voice is flat, her steps slow. You give her the best pieces of bread, and she pretends not to notice. The child wheezes constantly now, his chest fluttering like a paper sheet in wind. He sleeps more than he cries. His eyes don't focus. You hold him sometimes and try to remember what your own father looked like when you were that size. You can't. It doesn't matter. You won't be remembered either. One night, the baby stops making noise. You check on him just before dawn, touching his chest, waiting for movement. Nothing comes. You don't wake your wife. You carry the body outside, wrap it in your old cloak, and walk past the edge of the yard. The ground is hard, but not yet frozen. You dig slowly, quietly, with a stick in your hands, until the pit is deep enough that foxes won't find it. You lower him in gently, cover him with soil, and sit there for a long time after, palms stinging, lips numb. You try to say something, a prayer maybe, or a goodbye, but nothing comes out. There is no marker, just mud and silence. Your wife doesn't ask where the baby is, not at first. She wakes slowly, reaches toward the empty space beside the hearth, and goes still. When she finally turns to you, her eyes don't hold questions, only confirmation. You tell her it was peaceful. You don't mention the cold or the silence, or how long you sat beside the grave. She nods once, then starts the fire. Neither of you cry. There's no time for that. By the end of the week, the priest is talking about Easter. You're told it's a time of joy. The priest says it with his arms outstretched and his voice full of theatrical brightness. As if he's announcing a miracle, the steward says it with a smirk, already making lists of who owes what and who'll be pressed into which duties. The other villagers say it quietly, with that familiar tightness in their faces, the one they wear when talking about rain, or bad omens, or a sow that's gone dry. No one's smiling. Not really. Holy days don't bring joy here. They bring scrutiny, exhaustion, and more walking than any human soul should be required to do on an empty stomach. The preparations begin a week in advance. First come the ashes and the fasting. More fasting, technically, because there wasn't much to eat before anyway. But now it's official. The priest reminds everyone that gluttony is a sin. You watch a man nod solemnly while chewing bark-thick bread and think he might punch God if given half a chance. Then come the cleanings. The chapel must be swept, the paths cleared, the manor yard raked of old hay and pig droppings. You spend an entire day scrubbing the stone steps outside the nave with freezing water and a cloth so thin it dissolves halfway through the task. Your reward is a pat on the shoulder and a bowl of broth so clear it reflects your own hungry face. The banners are brought out next, frayed lengths of cloth painted with saints and suffering. You're told to hang them from posts and wave them during processions. The one you're assigned depicts Saint Sebastian, full of arrows, and staring upward like he enjoys it. You try not to meet his eyes. The pole you carry is heavier than it looks, and your shoulder cramps by the second hour of walking. The priest leads the procession, chanting in Latin while swinging a censer filled with choking smoke. You cough until your ribs ache. The smoke is supposed to purify the village. You suspect it just hides the smell of everything else. The children are herded into ranks and made to sing hymns they only half remember. The notes waver, the tempo lurches, and one of them faints from hunger halfway through the final verse. The priest frowns and keeps walking. Someone drags the boy out of the mud and leaves him propped against a fence. No one mentions him again. By the end of the day, your feet are soaked, your palms are blistered, and you're more tired than you are after a full shift in the fields. You ask if the celebration is over. It's not. The feast is tomorrow. You laugh once quietly. No one joins you. The feast is a performance. There's food technically, mostly lentils, cabbage and black bread, with the occasional crust of salted meat, if your family tithes well, or knows someone who butchers discreetly. A pig was slaughtered up at the manor. You could smell it on the wind. The Lord and his household dine separately, behind closed doors, with fresh loaves, sweet wine, and spices you've never even seen. You eat your portion sitting in the dirt beside the chapel, using your fingers and a broken spoon. Someone's dog stares at you the entire time. You don't blame it, you'd do the same. There are games of a sort, sack races for the children, who are too weak to run and fall over like dying lambs, a tug of war with a rope that smells like mould and blood, a contest to catch a greased pig that ends when the pig escapes into the stream and drowns. You help haul it out, waterlogged and limp, and are scolded for not cheering more. The priest says laughter is holy. You think he should try digging latrines for a week and see how holy he feels afterward. Then come the dances. Someone brings out a fiddle, cracked and out of tune, but serviceable. The music is fast, sharp, meant to lift spirits, though it mostly reminds you of bees in a bucket. The steward claps along, already drunk on ale you helped brew but weren't allowed to taste. He demands that couples join in. Refusing is ungrateful. You take your wife's hand and spin awkwardly in the mud, while the Lord's daughter watches from the steps in clean shoes, an address worth more than your entire house. She doesn't clap. She just wrinkles her nose and whispers something to her nurse. You can't hear it, but you feel it anyway. You try to enjoy yourself, if only for the sake of pretending. Your wife smiles once, weakly, as you twirl her by the wrist. She's too thin to twirl properly, and you nearly drop her. You both laugh, not from joy, but from something near its grave. The other couples dance too, slow and heavy, until the music dies out and the fiddler mutters something about broken strings. The priest announces the start of the moral inspection, a tradition you hadn't forgotten but had hoped would be skipped this year. It's exactly what it sounds like. One by one, households are named, and the priest or steward announces their virtues and faults. Who missed Mass? Who failed to tithe? Who was seen talking to a widow after dark? Who kept too many chickens without permission? You stand there, wet and aching, while the list of your failings is read aloud like a hymn in reverse. You're told to be grateful for the correction. It's for your soul's benefit. You nod. What else can you do? Arguing gets you more chores, or fewer rations, or worse. By sundown, the festivities are over. The fire pit is a slurry of half-burned logs and piss. The fields are still waiting. The cold has settled back in. You walk home with sore feet, an empty stomach, and the taste of cheap ale on your tongue, courtesy of a single mug handed out near the end of the feast to ensure the appearance of generosity. You drank it too fast, hoping it would dull something inside you. It didn't. It only made the headache worse. You reach the hut, duck your head through the door, and collapse onto the straw without removing your boots. Your wife follows a moment later, groaning softly as she eases down beside you. No words are exchanged. There's nothing left to say. You've danced in the mud for your betters, cheered for your own humiliation, and swallowed a festival like a stone. When you wake, your tongue is dry, your back is stiff, and the steward is already shouting outside. There's planting to do. Always planting. The saints are satisfied, the priest is paid, and the feast is over. Now you return to the fields. One day, you see the priest drinking wine again. Your wine. Not directly, of course. You never handed it to him. But it came from the grapes in the Lord's vineyard, crushed by feet like yours, tithed in jars you helped carry, taxed through a process so circuitous it may as well be alchemy. You see him now, through the chapel window, raising a goblet that glints red in the light, blessing himself before sipping. His robe is lined with fur, his boots have soles, his cheeks are full. You're not sure he remembers your name, but he certainly remembers what you owe. He preaches humility on Sundays and eats meat on Mondays, tells you that the meek shall inherit the earth, while collecting fees for blessings, baptisms, funerals, and forgiveness. Each service has a cost, each sacrament a price. You once saw him deny a burial prayer because the widow couldn't spare a chicken. He said it wasn't personal, just policy. She buried the body anyway, without the rites. The ground didn't seem to mind. He knows Latin, which makes him untouchable. You don't. Most people don't. He reads the Bible aloud and pauses dramatically, like he's revealing secrets instead of regurgitating lines he's performed 1,000 times. When you ask for clarification, he frowns as if your ignorance is offensive. You've memorized his rhythms, the rise and fall of damnation and salvation, but not the meaning. He says God is listening. You're not sure he likes what he hears. The priest isn't the only one. There's the miller too, a squat man with too many rings on his fingers and too much flour on his tunic to suggest he ever does the work himself. You bring your grain to his door because you're required to. The Lord owns the mill, and the miller operates it under a charter that no one in the village has seen but everyone fears. He scoops his toll, a fair portion, he says, and somehow your sack always comes back lighter than it should. You once weighed it, unofficially, with a stone and a sense of indignation. You were right, it was short, but saying so would have cost you more than flour. He has scales, but you're not allowed to see them. He measures with one hand and collects with the other, and the records always favour him. When you question it, gently, carefully, just once, he reminds you that the steward trusts him, and the steward in turn trusts the record kept by the scribe. You've never spoken to the scribe. He lives in a room above the chapel, surrounded by ink pots and scrolls that you're not allowed to touch. He rarely looks up. When he does, it's only to squint at you, like a pest he'd forgotten he'd left in the larder. You suspect he's never stepped in a field. His hands are clean, his robe's crisp. He copies figures by candlelight, records dues and tithes and punishments in careful lines. And if a number changes, goes missing, grows larger, slips into someone else's row, you have no proof. You can't read. You wouldn't even know where to begin. Once your neighbour tried to challenge a miswritten debt. The steward doubled the fine for insubordination. You watched the man sell his daughter's dowry shawl to settle it. She cried more for the cloth than for the money. Then there are the monks, the travelling ones mostly, robed in brown or black, smelling of beeswax and old bread. They arrive with satchels and sermons, declare themselves servants of God, and collect alms in the name of distant abbeys. They preach poverty while riding borrowed horses, sleep in the manor hall, and accept offerings with a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. They speak of charity. You never see them give any. One stayed a week once claiming to fast in solitude for divine clarity. The steward assigned a boy to bring him meals. You were that boy. He ate every morsel and told you never to speak of it. Then he delivered a sermon on the strength of self-denial and rode off with a new cloak someone's wife had sewn for the poor. No one said a word. He had a ring on his finger, a bishop's seal, or something close enough to scare everyone. Titles are as heavy as chains here. These men, the monk, the miller, the priest, the scribe, they're not noble. They don't swing swords or command soldiers. They don't own the manor or pass laws, but they stand beside the throne, hands outstretched, taking what slips between the cracks. They feed from the margins. They wear robes instead of armour and speak with holy conviction, but they're parasites all the same. Smiling ones, sanctified ones, shielded by the illusion of righteousness. You try not to hate them. You tell yourself they're just doing their jobs, just following the order of things. But some mornings, when your stomach knots from hunger and your boots soak through before sunrise, you catch sight of the miller's boy riding past on a pony, reins embroidered, shoes polished, cheeks ruddy with warmth and fat, and something inside you curls tight. You think of your own son, now gone, and how he never had a chance, how his breath fogged even while he slept. The boy rides by without looking at you. His pony snorts, hooves clicking cleanly over the packed dirt, and you step aside without thinking. Just another shadow on the road. You watch the boy disappear over the hill, your hands still crusted with flour and your mouth dry with salt. Behind you, the priest is lighting incense. The mill wheel turns, the ledger is updated, and somewhere far above, a monk is preaching about the virtue of humility. There comes a day when you snap, not loudly, not all at once. There's no shouted declaration, no thrown shovel or curse at the sky. It just happens, quietly, like a rope fraying until the last thread gives. One moment you're stacking bundles of thatch in the cold. The next, you're watching the tree line with the same hunger you usually reserve for stew. No one notices, no one asks. That night, while the others sleep, your wife curled around the last of the fire's warmth, your father wheezing against the far wall. You slip out the door, barefoot and quiet, like a ghost unsure of its own death. You make it past the goat pens, the chapel, the edge of the mill road. You keep moving. The woods swallow you like they've been waiting, the branches closing behind you with a whisper instead of a warning. You don't bring food, you don't bring water, you don't bring a plan. Just your cloak, your aching limbs, and the sense that anything, even freezing, even starving, is better than living another day being weighed, taxed and measured by people who wouldn't notice if you never came back. The first night is cold, but not unbearable. You find a hollow beneath a rotted log, wrap yourself in your cloak, and listen to the wind scratching through the trees. Your stomach growls once, twice, then gives up. You fall asleep to the sound of it complaining. In the morning your feet are numb, and your tongue feels like sand. You chew some bark, spit it out, and keep walking. You pass a dead bird half covered in frost. You stare at it for a long time before deciding you're not hungry enough. Not yet. By the second day, you're dizzy. You try eating moss. It helps, briefly, until the cramps start. You drink from a stream and immediately regret it. Your head throbs. You've started muttering to yourself. Just to break the silence, you pretend it's prayer, though you're not sure God is taking requests from fugitives. The forest feels less like freedom now and more like a slow punishment. Every tree looks the same. Every sound feels too loud or too quiet. You begin to worry you've walked in circles. You begin to worry someone's following. You're right. They find you on the third night. You tried to build a fire, failed, and curled up near a stump, hoping the cold would wait until morning. It didn't. The snap of twigs wakes you. The light of a torch follows. Then boots. Then voices. The steward's men. 2 of them. You don't run, not because you're noble, but because your legs won't move. You can barely lift your head before the first one kicks you in the ribs and laughs. They tie your hands behind your back, drag you upright, and say nothing else. They don't need to. The walk back is long and painful. You slip twice, fall once, and are hauled upright each time like a sack of potatoes with opinions. When you pass the chapel, you see the priest watching from the doorway. He doesn't blink. He just closes the door. Your wife is waiting in front of the hut. Her face is unreadable. She doesn't cry. She doesn't reach for you. She doesn't speak. You wish she had screamed. At least then it would have felt like someone still saw you. The steward doesn't hold a trial. He doesn't need to. You broke the law. You left the land. You fled your duty. The penalty is written somewhere. On parchment you'll never read. In ink you'll never touch. By hands that never ploughed a furrow. He announces your punishment with the same tone he uses for rainfall totals. A week in the stocks, 15 lashes, double labour for the season. Your father sighs. Your neighbours look away. No one objects. No one ever does. The stocks are a public affair. You're bound by the wrists and neck outside the chapel. Your back exposed to the wind. Your legs cramping by the hour. People walk past. Some pretend not to see you. Others make a point of spitting. A few children throw pebbles, mostly out of boredom. You grit your teeth and wait. Time doesn't move. Your thoughts don't either. You cycle through shame, anger, hunger, and back to shame. On the 4th day, it rains. You don't even flinch. You're already soaked. The lashes come after. The bailiff does it. He's a thick-armed man with a fondness for theatre, and he plays to his audience. Each strike lands with a sickening crack, and by the 5th, you've bitten through your own lip. You don't scream. You won't give them that. But you shake, hard, uncontrollably, and your knees buckle before it's over. When they untie you, you can't stand. They dump you in the dirt and walk away. The priest comes by later with a bucket of water and a psalm. You don't know which is colder. Recovery isn't really part of the process. You're expected to work the next day. You do, limping, stiff, your back a raw lattice of broken skin and dried blood. No one helps. Your wife brings you a rag soaked in weak ale, presses it to your side, and leaves it there without comment. You nod. She doesn't nod back. You understand. You failed her. You failed everyone. You tried to escape and only made things worse. The other villagers avoid your eyes now, not with cruelty, but with caution. You're a warning, a story mothers tell their sons, work hard or end up like him. The steward watches you closely for weeks afterward. He appears more often, unannounced, inspecting tools, asking questions, trailing you with his eyes like you're a sick animal he hasn't decided to kill. The priest mentions loyalty in his next sermon. Not by name, but close enough. The miller makes a joke about wandering feet. You laugh softly. It hurts your ribs. Eventually, the bruises fade. The scabs fall off. The limp becomes a rhythm. You go back to the fields, back to the mud, back to the same frozen mornings and splintered plough handles. No one says welcome back. No one says anything at all. And yet somehow, this silence feels heavier than before. Time passes, though you don't remember when exactly. The pain from the lashes fades, but something slower settles in its place. A heaviness in your limbs, a stiffness in your back, a quiet erosion you can't name. The seasons blur, winters come and go. You survive, barely, and then another year begins, not with hope, but with habit. You don't run again, you don't speak out. You work when you're able and rest when you're not. And little by little, the village begins to forget what you did. Eventually, even you do. Your knees ache. They've ached for years, but now the pain is sharper, deeper. Not just stiffness in the morning or soreness after a long day, but a grinding throb that starts before sunrise and follows you into sleep. You're 35, maybe 36, no one's certain. You feel 80. You move slower now, not out of laziness, but because your joints no longer answer quickly. When you bend to tie your boots, it takes effort. When you straighten, it takes more. You no longer rise with the first call of the steward. You rise when your body permits it, which is usually a moment too late. Your back curves in ways it didn't used to. Not dramatically, not enough to be noticed at first, but over time, it's settled into a stoop, a permanent lean toward the soil that shaped you. You're shorter than you were. Your fingers, once strong enough to grip a plough for 12 hours straight, now tremble when holding a ladle. You try to ignore it. You try to work around it. But the truth creeps in like mold. You're not much use anymore. You can't lift like you used to. You can't swing an axe for more than a few minutes without your shoulder locking. You pretend the pain is from an old injury, a tumble from a ladder, or a kick from an ox. But really, it's just time. Time has been gnawing at your muscles like a hungry rat. Your teeth are going too. One cracked last winter while chewing a piece of boiled barley root. Another simply fell out while you slept. You spat it into your palm in the dark and stared at it until dawn. Your gums bleed. Your breath smells sour. You rinse your mouth with warm water and crushed herbs, but it does nothing. Your wife says nothing, but she winces when you speak too close. She's aging too, though in her case, it's more in the eyes than the body. She still moves quickly when the bread starts to burn, still beats laundry with a practiced rhythm. But her gaze is thinner, distant, like she's always halfway between here and somewhere she can't describe. You had more children. The only one who survived past infancy is grown now and left the village last spring. Said he was going to find work near the river port. Said he'd send something back. He didn't. You tell people he must be busy. You don't say that you dream of him starving, or worse, thriving. If he is doing well, he's never coming back. No one does. Those who remain in the village don't remember you were strong once, that you could outpace most men your age, that you ploughed 2 fields in a single day during the flood year, that you lifted a full barrel when the ox cart failed. Those stories aren't retold. They aren't worth retelling. Now, when there's a stone to move or a beam to raise, you step back automatically, and the younger men don't even notice. They pass you like wind passes a stone, barely shifting for your presence. When people speak at gatherings, they speak over you. They assume you can't hear or won't care, or simply don't matter. Sometimes you open your mouth to join a conversation and close it again without making a sound. You listen more than you speak now, not out of wisdom, but because no one waits for your words. You've become part of the background, a piece of furniture that's no longer sturdy enough to sit on. You're not exempt from labour, of course. There's no retirement here, no rest, but the work you're given is smaller, slower, more symbolic than functional. You carry water in buckets that used to be too light for you. You sweep yards with a limp. You herd pigs and chase chickens, though they outrun you more often than not. The steward gives you meaningless tasks now, sweeping already swept corners, hauling wood too rotten to burn. It's not work, it's theatre. You try not to be bitter. You tell yourself this is natural, that all bodies slow, that you've done your share. But some mornings, when you wake with your fingers curled and your hip numb, you wonder what all that effort earned you. You worked harder than most, stayed loyal, stayed present. And now you're here, barely standing, barely wanted, still owing rent on a patch of dirt that your son abandoned, and your lord never visits. Your cloak is threadbare. You've mended it too many times to count, and the fabric is more patch than original cloth. Your boots are cracked, the soles lined with straw. You've stopped asking for replacements. You walk with a stick, not a carved one, not a cane, just an old branch you found and didn't return. It helps, mostly. On bad days, it feels like the only thing keeping you vertical. On worse days, even it doesn't. There are moments, brief, flickering, when something feels close to contentment, when the sun hits your face just right in the early morning, when your wife hums an old song while kneading dough, when a child runs past you and laughs, loud and bright and free of hunger. But those moments pass quickly. They're gusts of warmth in a long winter. You don't trust them to stay. No one says you're a burden. They don't have to. You can see it in how the younger men frown when you're assigned to their work party, how your wife hesitates before asking for help lifting the pot, how the steward pretends not to see you when rations are handed out. You take what's left. You eat last. You sleep light because there's less need to rest when your body can't recover anyway. You've started forgetting things. Small things first, like the names of boys you grew up with, or the word for a particular type of bird. Then bigger things, like which fields are fallow this season, or whether you already fed the goat. Sometimes you catch yourself standing still, unsure why you left the hut, or what you were meant to do. You blame it on the weather, on the hunger, on the years, but deep down, you know. One afternoon, you sit outside the hut, bowl in hand, chewing what might generously be called broth. It's warm water with a sliver of onion and a piece of bone too small to be useful. You chew it anyway, slowly, while your jaw clicks and your tongue searches the gaps where teeth used to be. Across the yard, a boy, not your boy, someone else's, walks past with a stick. He's maybe 13, maybe younger. He's tall already, strong still unbent. The stick he carries looks familiar. It's not your branch, not exactly, but it's the same size, the same curve, the same weight. He swings it without effort. Not out of necessity, but for fun. Pretending it's a sword, a banner, something magical. He passes without looking at you. You don't mind. You watch him go, the mud sucking at his boots, the wind catching the edges of his tunic. He laughs at something you can't hear. You sip your broth, lean against the wall and stare at the boy with the stick you once carried. One morning, you're too weak to rise. The fire has gone out. You felt it sputter sometime in the night. The air grew colder, the shadows sharper, and you couldn't find the strength to lift your hand for more kindling. Your bones feel hollow. Even breathing takes effort now, shallow and slow. Like the air is something you have to chew. You lie still, watching the dim light creep in through the slats in the door. And you know, without needing to be told, that this is the last time you'll see it. No one makes a fuss. No one rushes to your side with tears or prayers or whispered promises. Your wife sits across the room, hunched over a pot she hasn't stirred in a while, hands folded like she's forgotten what they're for. She glances at you once, then looks away. You don't blame her. She's already done her morning. It started years ago with your first limp, your first cough, the day you couldn't lift a bucket without shaking. She's watched you disappear piece by piece. This is just the final part. The others move quietly around the hut. Your niece steps over your legs with practiced indifference. A younger boy sits by the fire, poking ashes that won't catch. You think he might be your kin, or someone else's. It doesn't matter. No one asks if you need anything. There's nothing left to give, and nothing you want. You've lost the appetite for food, for conversation, even for memory. What's left is wait and waiting. Your vision blurs, then clears, then blurs again. The edges of the room seem to bend slightly, as if the walls have grown tired of holding themselves upright. The air tastes like ash and boiled grain. You hear a goat outside, bleating low. The sound is almost comforting. You wonder if it's the same goat from years ago, or a replacement. It doesn't matter. Goats don't care who feeds them, only that someone does. The priest doesn't come. No one sent for him. There's no coin for the sacraments, no spare eggs for the offering, and no time for ceremony. He's attending to the steward's cousin this week, a boy who fell from a horse and broke nothing but pride. He'll get incense, he'll get blessings, he'll get buried near the chapel wall. You, on the other hand, will get what everyone else like you gets. A shallow hole, a few muttered words and dirt packed with a spade that's also used for the latrine. You don't resist. You don't cry out. Your hands lie limp at your sides, the skin thin and yellowed, veins rising like roots under bark. Your breath slows. The room grows quieter. You drift in and out of sleep. Though the difference hardly matters. The world narrows to the sound of your chest rising, falling, pausing, and rising again. Each time you wonder if it'll start back up. Eventually, it doesn't. They find you in the morning. Your eyes are still open. No one bothers to close them. A blanket is pulled over your face, not out of reverence, but to keep the flies off until someone is free to dig. Your body is left in the corner of the hut for most of the day. Life continues around it. A pot simmers. The children bicker. Someone spills water and curses. When the grave is ready, you are dragged out and laid on a makeshift sled. A broken door with 2 ropes nailed to the sides. Your legs bounce over every rock. You don't feel it. The manor graveyard is more pit than plot. A rectangle of earth behind the animal pens, ringed with scrub and stones. There's no fence, no markers, just lumps in the ground and the vague memory of names. Some were carved into wood once, but the rain took care of that. Others were remembered in stories, but no one tells those anymore. Too many mouths to feed. Too many chores. Too little space in the mind for the dead, when the living are barely holding on. You're buried quickly. The hole isn't deep, just enough to discourage dogs. A few words are mumbled, not from scripture, but habit. He worked hard. He didn't complain much. He was quiet. They say these things because they sound respectful, because they don't take long to say. Someone spits into the grass, not out of disrespect, but necessity. Then the dirt is shoveled in. No shroud, no song, no last rites, no marker. By the end of the day, no one could point out the spot without guessing. Within the week, your name is no longer spoken aloud. The hut you left behind is quieter, but not empty. Your wife still rises before dawn. She stokes the fire with the same hands that once patched your cloak, sweeps the floor without looking toward your corner, and eats in silence with a mouth that no longer shapes your name. She doesn't speak of you. She doesn't have to. The walls remember. Another season turns, rain softens the ground, the plough passes over it, again and again, until even the slight rise of your grave is levelled flat. Barley is planted where your ribs lie. The field doesn't care. The soil doesn't mourn. It takes and gives, as it always has. If anything grows better there, no one mentions it. No one dares. In time, even the stool you sat on will be repurposed. Even the patch on your cloak will fray. The days will stretch on. The hut will weather, and the world will keep moving. Not because it forgets you, but because it never really noticed you were here. That brings us to the end of tonight's Quiet Descent, the story of a man who was never a knight, never a rebel, never a name worth writing down, just a serf bent under centuries of silence, whose life fed the land more reliably than it ever fed him. If you're still listening, thank you for walking through history with me. If you'd like early access to more of these slow collapses through forgotten lives, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten corners of history you'd like to see covered. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Amanda Lamke, and Rich Davis. Sleep well.